So I am about to go live with Amelia Warner, which is going to be really, really exciting. I know she's got lots and lots of fans on here, and I'm looking forward to seeing her a lot. We met swimming actually, and I obviously haven't seen her for a long time because of the situation, and it's going to be really, really interesting talking to her about her work, her life at the moment, creativity. I want to know about how she writes her beautiful music. I've been listening to her music a lot, particularly in the last few days, and the way that it gets into your head and the way that she kind of describes emotion, I suppose, in in music is really, really exciting. So here she is. And it's very nice because we're obviously at the end of the week. It's Friday. Perfect Pilates music. Yeah, it's incredibly relaxing, her music, isn't it? It's very kind of conducive to a hi.
Hi. It worked.
It works, yes. How lovely to see you.
Oh, you too.
It's so doing these interviews every week is such a nice opportunity to like have FaceTime, literally, with so many different people.
Yeah.
And it's lovely to see you.
You too.
How's lockdown life going for you?
It's just such a weird thing, isn't it, to try and kind of distill, and it's so evolving. I definitely am struggling more this time. I think that it's just harder, and I think that all the kind of positivity and even maybe the novelty of it has gone. And it's just, the weather's been really horrible. It's just, I feel like I've just been like slopping around in mud for a month, and it's just kind of, it's hard when you can't get outside and you can't be creative and thinking about fun stuff to do. It's so limited right now what we can actually do. And it's also, I guess, just not knowing how long it's going to go on for, and I've been having a nightmare sleeping, and it's just it's been tricky. But then actually, when I on the surface of things, it's fine, like I'm fine and everything's fine, and the kids are fine, and like it's fine.
I think it's okay to feel we're lucky, and we're okay, and we've got work, and we've got places to live, and we've got our health and so on, but it's still okay to feel this is really, really difficult. And the kind of the flatness. I was just talking with Pete, my husband, about the weekend, and well, what do we do this weekend? Well, nothing more to do than the normal, like we could play some board games, and not more board games, please.
Yeah. But, and I can't work out what's worse, the weeks or the weekends, because in some way the week at least is a bit of structure, and I can get some work done, and and then it's and then the weekend it's just there really is kind of nothing to break it up. And our little one she's not even 2 yet, so even like the idea of like playing a board game is heaven to me. But we can't even do stuff like that because within 2 minutes she's calm, she's grabbed everything, she's thrown everything, she's climbed on the table, so there's just it's just tough to have any to do anything at the moment. It's really tough.
So we're going to talk about kind of creativity. That's what I really want to talk to you about how I've been listening to so much of your music, and it's so beautiful, and it's such kind of deeply peaceful, and it really feeds your soul when you have it around. When I've been doing things, I personally find with small children, I've got 5 kids, 3 of whom are quite small, some music just really does my head in. It's more noise, it's more confusion, and your music is like completely the opposite of that. It takes you to another place, but you can still kind of do what you're doing as well around domestic life.
Oh, good, thank you.
Tell us about how do you find time specifically? How do you create at the moment? Can you work in short bursts? Do you have to totally immerse yourself in something? How do you kind of combine it with the fact of not being able to go away and get other kind of inspiration, I suppose, as well? Because that thing of like being out and seeing people and talking to people and smelling things, tasting things, having
Yeah.
other ideas. Where is your creativity coming from at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, there's I've discovered that actually I'm a lot better when I have less time and I can work in kind of short, really intense bursts.
Yeah.
I think that in a weird way, that's probably why I've been more creative since having children, or I've been not more creative but more productive. I've produced more work since having kids, because I think there was something about kind of my 20s and just having that kind of time stretching around that I never did anything, weirdly. You know, I found it really difficult to focus on something, and then once I had children, suddenly time was kind of put into these little you know, mini boxes or whatever, little, you know, segments,
bites.
Yeah, exactly. And that worked really well for me. And if I can just sit somewhere for like 2 or 3 hours and really go for it, then I can get a lot done. And then I can walk away from it. And that's so in some ways, you know, lockdown's been great for that, because I've been able to kind of steal away and have these times. And I mean, actually, I was working on a film for, you know, over the summer, so that was a specific thing. And I think when you're working on a project that's kind of to picture, or like a film score, you know, you've got a list of cues and you have to get through them and you're ticking them off, and you know, it's really organized, and it's a different way of working. Whereas if I'm writing my own pieces, that's, you know, it's different and it's harder to pin down, and I struggle more with it, actually. I think because I don't have those restrictions and those limits and those deadlines, I you know, I have to self-motivate, and I'm not the best at that. So it was really nice to have some proper work going on during lockdown, because it, you know, it just gave me somewhere to go in my mind and physically that was aware. So that was really nice. And I know what you mean about, you know, the thing that I'm struggling with is, I always feel like with creativity that there are cycles, and I definitely noticed, for me, I have cycles of absorption where I'm just like a sponge, and I'm just, you know, listening to loads of music, watching loads of movies, and I'm, you know, thinking about loads of things and reading books. And then I go into a kind of shutdown where I write. And I normally, when I'm writing, I don't listen to music. I can sometimes can't even have the radio on. I kind of have to have this weird space. And I think I've had that space now for a really long time, which has been great. But I'm definitely ready to just get, you know, inspired again by outside things, and be influenced and hear live music, and, you know, all that kind of, I'm so ready for that.
Do you, when it comes to doing films or your own music, which do you kind of prefer, and which feels like it's more abundant, I suppose, inside you when you're writing something? How does it work with a film? Are you like visualizing the whole film and kind of living through the characters and then living their emotions? I'm really interested by the way you kind of create emotion in your music, I suppose, as well.
I think with I think when it's to picture, and when you've got a film, so you usually, you know, I usually write some music for the film before I see anything. So from a script, and that is just kind of, you know, from an initial feeling that story gives me. I'll write something, and it doesn't necessarily always end up in the film, but it's just a kind of, you know, starting point. And then I see the film, and so then it's much more about responding to what I'm seeing, to what the director's telling me he wants from the scene. And it's a lot more of a kind of it's a collaboration. You know, you're really trying to deliver what the director wants from the scene, and you're trying to kind of hit beats and marks, and so there's lots of different things kind of going on, and they're different. They're really different. So it's hard to say which I think I sometimes find writing for film more fulfilling, because I love the collaboration of it. And sometimes when you're just creating something for yourself, or for your own, you know, from your own creativity, that doesn't have like a function, I guess, I find that maybe I question it more. I struggle with it a bit more. Whereas when I see something and I'm watching an image and it's got my music and it's got words written by an amazing writer and it's an amazing person and, you know, acting, and I feel this enormous sense of just
Like,
fulfillment and happiness, because it's like being part of a bigger
yeah.
picture.
So it's nice, that feeling of being part of a big creative
Yeah,
project with lots of different people
yeah,
collaborating. I love the idea of that. And do you
yeah.
find, if you're working on a film, can you do your own music as well, or do you just have to concentrate on the film?
It normally just concentrate on the film, because they usually just give you no time. You know, when it's,
Right.
you know, it's like, okay, you have this amount of time to write this amount of music, and it's never
Yeah.
enough.
Yeah.
So yeah, I normally do that, and then we'll kind of move on to my own stuff, or you know, or in between I'll do little bits and pieces, and I'm always making, you know, voice notes on my phone, or so I've got, like, my phone's just full of little ideas, and then I can go back and go through them
Yeah.
and see if there's anything there that's, you know, of any interest.
Yeah, when I'm writing or when I'm thinking about an idea, I'm constantly sending myself notes and text messages, all the
Yeah,
idea, you know, all the time about the way somebody looked or what somebody said. And
yeah.
do you find that you can even have just like a couple of notes or cut, you know, something very, very small, which could become something much bigger when you then kind of go into it and concentrate on it?
Yeah, definitely. And it can be
Mm.
something super simple, you know, just two chords, or, you
Yeah.
know, just one little motif. And, you know, I think that my music, especially the stuff that, you know, that's my own, released under my name, it's usually very simple, and it's normally one motif or one simple thing repeated, and I kind of like adding layers. And but I always try, I like things to be as simple as possible, and usually my process is about taking away, because I
Right.
just want the simplest melody I can find.
Mm. And when you're I was really listening really carefully to your music, and I was trying to work out. I know nothing about writing music at all. I can't pretend that I know anything about it. But do you sort of visualize it as a shape or as a color? Because as I was listening to it, I was kind of being, you know, I was able to see a shape. And
Oh, wow.
especially when I write, I think in color a lot of the time, actually. And I was
Really?
wondering how it kind of, when you've got an idea that's there, does it take some kind of physical form in your mind, or in your, even in your heart, I suppose? How does it kind of come out of you and turn into this beautiful, beautiful stuff that you create?
I definitely do see music in shapes. So, and I'm not classically trained. I'm not, you know, I don't read music. I mean,
Mm.
I can read it very basically. I mean, Dulcie, my eldest daughter, is pretty much at the level I am of reading, you know, music. So I never, you know, I really struggled with music theory, and it just didn't work for me in my brain. But I played the piano since I was really, really small, and so it's all, I kind of see everything in a shape and a pattern, and a lot of it's about making patterns. And especially when I sit at the piano, it's usually about making some kind of pattern. Um, and I do see stuff in color as well. You know, I'll
Mm.
see kind of colors, but mainly it's mainly shapes, I think,
Mm.
kind of,
Mm.
you know, abstract shapes.
So you started off in the Royal Court Youth Theatre. That was where you started as a child. And were you always playing music from a really, really young age? Did your parents, just thinking about your own kids as well, I suppose, and kind of encouraging and nurturing a kind of creative impulse in children, were you really, really encouraged in that direction as a little girl?
Yeah, I definitely was, and I was really lucky to be in a, you know, in a space that was, you know, really encouraged. And I was encouraged, but I wasn't pushed. I think that's a really important distinction, and something I'm really wary of with my own children, is to kind of harbor their curiosity and encourage it, but to not kind of push, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and so it was always very informal and very relaxed, you know, and I just played the piano all the time. Like, that was
Yeah.
just my kind of thing that I did from
Mm.
really, really young. And my mum always says that, you know, I used to tell stories on the piano, and that, you know, that there'd be the goodies and the baddies and the this and the that. And, you know, that's how I would tell stories. And one of my kids does that as well, and it's, you know, it's funny, and I'm torn, because in some ways I wish I had stuck with all of the, you know, the lessons and the theory and the grades and all that stuff, because, you know, I'm regretful that I'm not a great pianist, and that, you know, certain things are out of my reach, because I kind of limited myself to learning in this very rudimentary way, where I just kind of taught myself and got by, and then never really progressed. I'm sorry, that's somebody else's iPad ringing. And so I have frustrations about that, but then I also think maybe I wouldn't be able to write in the same way if I knew all the rules, and if I knew all the, you know, if I knew all the correct way of playing and the progressions, and, you know, maybe I wouldn't have the freedom that I have, in terms of I can just write in a really or truthful way, and I'm not thinking about theory, I'm not thinking about
So interesting, the idea that
so,
it might actually constrain, more theory and more lessons might have constrained you in some way.
yeah, well, I think it can. I mean, not to say that it definitely would, but I've definitely, you know, I have met people who are incredible musicians and incredibly proficient in their instrument, but they can't compose, they can't write music. And I think they're almost like using different parts of your brain. And obviously there are people who can do both and who are brilliant. But I just sometimes wonder, you know, I'm, like I said, I'm torn. So in some ways I feel like if my children show an interest, I want them to kind of have all of that theory and have all of that training, so that then they can have the confidence to be creative from that point, which I don't have, you know. And I think that really did maybe eat into my confidence for a long time, and it prevented me from, you know, taking it seriously or thinking that I could be a musician, because I didn't have that training. So I you know, it took me a long time to be okay with that.
Do you find that as you get older and you mature, that your relationship with music and creativity changes? I certainly find that the more I write, the more confident I feel, and I think it's really affecting my work in a really positive way, actually, at the moment, and enabling me to kind of create and produce work, because that a big part of creating is feeling like you can do it and you have a right to do it. Do you
Totally.
find that sort of the more you're doing it and the bigger your success, and, you know, you're having big success and really recognized for what you're doing and winning awards, does that kind of help you, or does it create extra pressure? What's your relationship with that sort of experience?
I think it's definitely helped, and I think that any success I have, I feel kind of emboldened by, and I feel like supported by, and it helps me grow, and it helps me just, you know, believe that I can do it. And you know, I think we all have that imposter syndrome, you know, and I think particularly doing what I'm doing, you know, it's a very male dominated industry. You know, there's like 2% of film composers are women, and you know, it's a really, and it's a very particular, you know, club. And I think that it's changing, which is really exciting. But I definitely felt like I was, you know, I don't know, taking up space in the wrong place, or I felt I had massive imposter syndrome. And so the more you get any recognition or any validation, I guess it just makes me feel like, okay, I'm allowed to do this, and I can do this. And I think that the other change that happened for me as I've gotten older is just, and especially since having children, and especially since having girls, because I have 3 girls. And I was never really ambitious before having children. Like I was really uncomfortable with that word. And I didn't really understand why anyone would, I just was having a really nice time. And I was just like having a nice time, hanging out with my friends and doing bits and pieces to get by. But I really didn't have this sense of, I need this, you know, I need success in this way, or I maybe misunderstood what that meant. And I thought that meant, oh, well, you want acknowledgement, or you need attention. I don't know. I misunderstood it. And I think that what I've come to realize, and actually you spoke about this, you know, Nell's funeral, about self-realization. And I think that was the thing that I didn't understand, and that now I realize is so important, is that actually, you know, creating work or being ambitious isn't about achieving certain outside things. You know, it's about becoming yourself, your true self.
Yeah.
And I think that when I had Dulcie 7 years ago, I remember having this kind of moment and thinking, who am I going to be to her? Like who I want her to see me like doing stuff I love and being fulfilled, and you know, and even if that means I'm not with her as much, or I'm taken away from her a bit more than I would if I just looked after, you know, stayed at home with her. I just thought I have to do it. Because, and so this weird, so that's kind of the first real time that I felt this kind of ambition for myself was after having her.
Yeah. And that sort of, I think it's so, and that's what I did talk about in Millie was at my sister Nell's funeral. She was an incredible creative woman, and she had sent me a message which I talked about at Nell's funeral about, just to fill in for people, about realizing yourself, nurture the things that you are interested in, and be the person that you want to be, and keep on showing your children the things that you know that are important to you. But it's quite hard, I think, because we feel a certain amount of guilt for concentrating on ourselves in that way, and finding the time, as you say, that takes away, you know, that takes you away from motherhood, I suppose. How do you kind of I mean, maternal guilt is it's such a difficult thing to deal with.
Yeah.
How do you deal with it? Do you you know, how do you kind of, because it's incredibly important, and I know that if I'm not creating, I'm a much less good mum, I suppose, to my kids as well.
Yeah.
Do you have any kind of ways of managing that feeling?
No, I mean, I just try really hard to not feel guilty.
Feel it,
you know, and I do, and I just try really hard to be really strict on myself about it, and just and say, you know, this is important. You know,
really important.
If I'm working on something, or if I'm, you know, that it's really important. And then the other thing that I don't know if you find this as well, but I think when you're creative, it's not necessarily always when you're making work, and that's what's really difficult to differentiate. Is that, you know, there are all these times where, you know, it might look like I'm doing nothing, but, you know, I'll be, you know, walking or going for a swim or listening to music or kind of reading a book and being really affected by it, and that informs my work. But it might look like to other people that I'm just being really indulgent and kind of because not all of the creation happens, you know, when you're writing or when I'm sitting at my piano. So I think for me it's more about that. When I'm on a project and when I'm actually sitting down and I'm writing something, that's really tangible. But for me, it's all the other stuff that needs to happen in order for me to be able to create, that I feel guilty about, you know, and that I have to be really, you know, I have to just be really strong and say, no, this is important, and this is part of my work. And, you know, even though it looks like I'm not doing anything, like there's stuff percolating and there's stuff going on. And then I often find if I'm really good about spending that time and using that time to kind of, then I sit down and I write, and it just kind of comes, and I'm in this amazing position where I can sit down and be so productive. But I have to do both.
I think it's like a sort of, I find that completely, that the kind of thinking time is like a sort of filtration that goes on, and that is definitely as important as the time that I'm actually sitting at the keyboard and trying to write something. And if I have a lot of domestic stuff that's been going on and not enough time on my own, or not enough time reading or just thinking, and I sit down at the computer, I quite often just can't produce anything anyway. So there has to be that time which is just a the kind of thought process around creativity, I suppose. How do you feel if you're you know, like over Christmas there was a couple of weeks where I didn't do any writing, I didn't do any, and I felt awful. How do you feel when you're not creating, when you're not writing music? What does it make you feel like?
I can go quite a long time and I can be fine. And I'm quite good at kind of, I guess, compartmentalizing it a little bit. And if I've been in a really intense, like if I've just done a film, I'm more than happy to then have, you know, a couple of months of not even thinking about music.
Yeah.
But then it definitely starts to, you know, there definitely is a change. And then I start to get really frustrated, and I start to get quite, you know, probably not that nice to live with.
Yeah. It's like
You
a
know,
knot, isn't it?
yeah, it's like an
Right.
itch. It's an itch. It's like this, like, oh, I just need to,
Yeah.
yeah. So that builds up
Mm.
time.
What about other things? Because we obviously met because we started swimming in the river together, which was a
Yeah.
really, and unfortunately, lockdown and the way, you know, has meant that we can't really do that anymore. But I found that act of going and doing something kind of physically courageous in a way, and that pushed you into a new place, really, really helpful in terms of almost like finding the outer edges of myself, and from
Yeah.
there I could find more stuff to write about, I suppose. And you've kept up the swimming, haven't you?
Yeah. I'm
What did
obsessed. I mean, it's become such an integral, important part of my life. You know,
how
it's
often do you
really
swim now?
probably 3 or 4 times a week, I'd say.
Wow.
And
Wow.
during, you know, so at certain points last year, I was swimming every day because it really
Wow.
was the only thing that was keeping me sane, I think.
Yeah. What does it make you feel?
I think what you said about it making you feel courageous, I think that's the main thing that, I mean, did for me was, you know, that I think it's Glennon Doyle who says, you know, we can do hard things. And I think that was what swimming meant to me. It was like, you can do hard things. Like, look, you just did that. And every single time I turn up in the winter on that riverbank and look at the grey, black water and the freezing cold and the wind, and I just think, oh, you can't do this. Don't you know why you're doing this? And then I would do it. And it was just, I guess, proving myself wrong again and again and again.
Yeah.
And doing something that, you know, and not recognizing myself. You know, a few years ago, I would have never done something like that. I would have just thought, why would you put yourself in discomfort? Why would you, you know? And so I think that it was just this really exciting feeling of going, you know, of not recognizing myself in something and going, oh wow, you can do stuff. And then I think that bleeds into, I think that bled into other things in my life and definitely my work, because usually I would have been overwhelmed with something, or I would have been worried that I couldn't do it. And I think it just made me feel like, no, you can do hard things, and you can do things that, you know, you can surprise yourself.
Yeah. What else do you do that kind of helps you? We've talked a bit about sobriety as well, and the emotional state of not drinking anything. And I've you know, it's something I'm sort of continually trying, and sometimes do periods of it, and I find it really interesting because it makes you feel everything so much more, doesn't it? It really heightens your emotional life so much more.
Yeah.
How do you feel it affects? Because I know that you've been not drinking for quite a long time, haven't you? Now?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much all of last year. I'd say most of last year was, you know, I didn't drink, and I was actually really surprised at the effect. You know, I kind of stopped because it was just ruining my sleep, and I was like, oh, you know, even if I just had a couple of drinks, it would, you know, I wouldn't sleep. So that's why I stopped, and I didn't expect it to have such a kind of impact. Went to everything, to be honest, but particularly being creative and being productive. I think that you know, when I even just drinking a little bit, I think it just creates a kind of apathy in me. You know, not everybody, but definitely me. It just created a kind of, oh, I kind of can't. Oh, I don't know. I'll do it tomorrow. No, I don't feel creative today, and I don't really feel. And I think that just removing that, it really did do something to my, you know, just to my creativity. It kind of unleashed it, and it was really great. And also I think I just maybe approached it in a slightly different way, and I was just a bit more disciplined. And, you know, I read like The Artist's Way, and I would do, you know, my morning pages, and I started kind of, I guess, implementing some really useful things that then in turn did just lead to me being to being creative kind of all the time.
Do you feel that do you find that not drinking is also like and being completely sober is like a cumulative thing, that it's the more you do it, the more, it's not just you know, having a week off drinking or something, it's like a long thing which gets richer and gets more kind of multi-layered. When my sister gave up drinking, she said that she felt as though this was just like a web of kind of being removed from her eyes, and she could see more and more about the world.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I keep thinking about, oh, well, maybe I'll just have a drink on a Friday night, or, you know, a special occasion, or, you know, and how, whether, you know, whether I want to drink again and in what way. And then I kind of, but I wonder if, like, do you lose the gold? Like, do you earn that, you know?
Yeah,
And it's like, I kind of feel like you probably do. And
yeah,
you kind of have to just live. It's like a different way of living, you know?
yeah.
And I think you can't really do both. Yeah, I think it's definitely a question that I'm thinking about a lot at the moment.
What kind of things do you what do you like reading to sort of feed yourself and nurture yourself? I personally read a lot of poetry. I love reading poetry,
Yeah.
and a lot of anthologies of poetry on the go. What
Yeah.
books do you have on your desk or by your bed or on the kitchen table?
I definitely read a lot of poetry as well, and especially in the last year. I think because I've been struggling with concentration, and I've had like little kind of periods of time where I've just really struggled to finish things or to see things through. And poems, you know I can finish a poem, so that's kind of, you know, a really nice way. And I've been reading a lot of non-fiction as well, actually. And lots of memoirs and lots of, you know, biographies, and that's kind of been really interesting. I'm trying to think. I mean, I read a lot, and I read a kind of mix of stuff. I'm not. Yeah, I need to. I feel like I need to read more of the kind of classics. I haven't done enough of those, and when I do read those, I do feel really inspired musically.
Yeah.
You know, when I read, like, you know, Jane Eyre, or, you know, I just was like, oh wow, you know, those books, because they're so atmospheric.
Yeah. When you're reading like something like that, can you see the music? Are you hearing it as well?
Sometimes, not always, but sometimes. There's
Wow.
definitely a few things that I've read, and I can 100% hear like a soundtrack to it, a kind of very broad.
How exciting. That must be really exciting. When I'm writing and I'm writing about emotion, I have to feel it again. So it can be really painful doing the writing. It can also be really exciting and fun, and you're feeling the fun memories as well. Your music is so full of emotion, and it's quite melancholic as well, isn't it? There's a kind of real melancholy. I have to say melancholy is sort of one of my favorite places to be. I enjoy the feeling of it.
Yeah.
Are you feeling the stuff as you're writing it again?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, because I think that I don't necessarily feel emotion in a kind of, you know, I wouldn't be, but it's almost just like a place I go to. Do you know what I mean? It's like a place within the music. And I think that melancholy is a word that, again, I'm always kind of a bit drawn to, or like wistful, or like, I like things that are just kind of beyond reach in some way. And so, I mean, if I'm writing music for a film and there's a very emotional scene happening, then I will very often be crying as I'm writing the music. And, you know, because if you're watching performances and, you know, the story, and you're so invested in it, so I will feel, you know, emotion certainly for those things. And there are some cues that I've written that, you know, I can't watch. You know, I'll write the music and then I'm like, please don't make me watch that again. You know, because it's really hard. But then with my own music, it's a bit more, I'm a bit like more detached from it, if I'm honest. There's a kind of, there's a detachment that happens. And I think with, certainly with, I wrote an EP called Visitors, and that was all about, you know, the idea of this kind of house, and all of these women who'd lived in the house over the years, and they all had their own kind of character through the music. And I suppose with that, I was thinking about them and trying to write as them. So that was, you know, kind of writing a bit in character, I guess. But I think for me, usually it's about the melody. And I guess there's a slight detachment of emotion, because that is more about the the overall thing, and kind of trying to capture something within that.
Yeah. And what I really love the idea that basically anybody can be creative, and it can feel very, when I'm writing, I sometimes think I can't do this, I'm not good, as anybody is. You have that self-doubt, this feeling of I can't be doing it, or I'm not good enough, or I'm terrible at drawing, for example. So when my kids make me draw, I just find it like this very humiliating experience. I can't even draw a stick person, to be honest with you. But for anybody watching this, what sort of advice would you give about freeing your creativity and feeling your creativity? Because I truly believe that the quality of what's coming out, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether the book's going to be published. It doesn't matter whether the song is going to be heard by anybody but you. It's the fact that you are doing it. But what kind of advice would you offer to people to help their creativity, to nurture it, to live with it more?
I think, I mean, I love Elizabeth Gilbert and everything she kind of talks about with creativity, and it really resonates with me so much. And I do believe that creativity is almost like this other thing, this other being that, kind of, if we're lucky enough to channel it in some way. But I think that the best thing that I've found is that, to just be in a position, like be ready is always the thing that I think, just be ready. So when those come, when those ideas come, when you get that little flurry of excitement in your tummy because you've thought of something, like be ready to jump off that point. And I think that there are certain things you can do, like some people meditate, or I mean, I do think for me cold swimming has been really great for that. Getting loads of sleep, like not drinking maybe, or there are all these different things. But I think that kind of making sure that, I mean, I think there's that misconception of, to create art you have to be suffering, or you have to be in pain, or you have to be in a mess. I mean, personally, I've never found that for myself. Like, I create when I'm really healthy and happy, and when I feel safe, and when I feel supported, and when I feel that everything's okay, and when I've had loads of sleep, and when I feel really connected to myself is when I am my most creative. So I think that doing anything you can to just really look after yourself, and then be ready, so when those ideas come, you can just like jump on them and pivot, kind of just be really agile and ready. And then I think the other thing that I kind of always say to myself is like, just don't question the decision anymore. So if you've decided to write a musical or a novel about this, or and then you're halfway through it and you're like, this is awful, this is so bad, why have I done this? Oh, I know, maybe I'll change it, so actually it's going to be about this, or maybe I won't make it a musical, or maybe I'll make it like a comedy, or and that's when it all starts to unravel. And I think that you just don't question it, just, this is what you're writing, this is where you found yourself, and just finish it. And it doesn't have to be good, and then no one has to hear it, and no one has to see it, no one has to read it, but just finish it, just follow the idea to the end. And I found that really helpful. And I have to say, I have to say it to myself all the time. I'll be in the middle of writing something and I'm like, oh, why on earth did you choose to use the harp for this? It's totally wrong using this. And it's like, no, just finish the initial idea. And I think that can be really good kind of thing to do.
I think that thought of the forward momentum is really, really inspiring and really important. And it's also really nice to know that someone like you, who is creating amazing work, has self-doubt as well. Because it's easy to look at other people and think, oh, they're just like whipping out those pictures or doing this incredible dance, knowing the amount of sort of self-doubt that goes with it.
But so much
for the momentum. I've just finished first draft of my third book, and it's a mess, and I've got to go back and rework it, but it is that draft, and getting the stuff down on the page. So if you can sort of think of yourself as a vehicle moving forward, something which is moving forward inexorably.
Exactly.
It's so important.
Elizabeth Gilbert says that, doesn't she? It's very hard to stand on a tightrope, but it's a lot easier to run on it. And I think there is that moment, isn't there, where you're just on that bit, and you just got to keep going, because otherwise you'll fall. And then you can go back and you can fix it and you can make it better and you can change it, but you just got to get it finished.
It's so nice talking to you. It really, really is. What's next in your, what are you working on now, and what's kind of next up for you?
I'm gonna do another album of my own music. Hopefully, I'm gonna start that in the spring. And then I had this really interesting, this funny kind of project, which I started at the beginning of lockdown, and then I kind of stopped actually and didn't follow my own advice, and I just was like, no, it's not really working, and I don't think it's going to work as and it was actually to write this musical, this children's musical.
Oh, really?
I was like, oh, it's not really working, maybe it shouldn't be a musical because it's from a book, and I was kind of adapting it, and I just let it go, and I forgot, and I didn't think about it for a few months. And then I was actually reading The Artist's Way at the time, and I was doing my Artist's Way, and then I had this idea about writing something else, and I sat down at the piano and I just wrote all of this, these three pieces kind of just really just came out. And as soon as I started playing them, I was like, this is the musical. It's such a, because it's a really particular kind of atmosphere and genre. I was like, oh my God, like this is so weird. Like three things just came out, having not thought about it for months. And I just thought, okay, so and in that Elizabeth Gilbert way, she believes that, ideas come and then they move on. And I did just feel like, okay, you're telling me that, you want to be written, and
you're here.
You're here, and I need to do this. So I'm basically, then I did a film in between, but I'm now picking up that the musical idea, and it's actually written, and now it's just about kind of going back and seeing what's actually there and what else I need to do. So I'm really enjoying that. It's really fun.
Exciting. How exciting. Well, it's been so lovely talking to you. Thank you very, very much for your time. And it's
Thank you for asking me.
I think hearing people talking about how they create is an important thing. I think it helps other people and to do more of it. So it's been just a real joy to have this discussion. Thank you very, very much.
I've got these inspired by you that I'm going to have now.
I don't eat the whole packet.
No, I don't think I could do all 6, but that made me laugh so much when you did that. I was like, amazing.
Well, I really hope I see you again before too long. We get to swim together at some point.
Yes, I would love that.
That would be really, really lovely. But lots and lots of love. Have a lovely weekend.
Love. You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.